Welcome to the sixth episode of the Right Cast. Now, as I said, we are making this episode right after the last one. So again, don't mind the clothes, okay? It's actually been a week. I'm lying. No, but
Yeah,
yeah.
don't
So
tell me how to live
basically,
my life. I can do this if I want.
so basically, this is a very interesting topic. Um, Again, I always say that, but that's because all we do is interesting topics. And this one is something that personally, anyone who knows me, which is 99.99% of you, right? Because you all know me, right? You will know that this is something I've really felt strongly about just in my personal life and for a number of years now. And it's something that whenever I tend to talk to other writers, at some point I will bring it up. And it's because over the years, I've seen a certain trend and pattern of behavior. And this trend and pattern of behavior has taken the form of what I see with a lot of writers. And I will point out specifically writers because we'll get into how there are other art forms where this doesn't apply as much. Um, and some of the ways in which you see how a lot of writers will become like what I would think of as modest, right? And just kind of downplay their own ability, their own success. And I kind of just wanted to like ask the question of why do writers do this? Should they do this? And you know, that's pretty much it. So with that being said, I wanted to ask you, Anthony, why is it that for you specifically this topic matters? Because for me, like I already said, it's something I've always felt strongly about, and I think over the course of the episode, it will become like clear as I express myself how I feel about it. But for you, because I actually don't know, and I'm genuinely curious, because we've had this topic written down for the last few weeks, pretty much since the beginning, before we even started the podcast, and it seemed like a topic you always was kind of interested in.
Yep.
So, is there a specific reason as to why?
Yeah, so I have two different reasons for this. The first one is that I am very interested in helping storytellers share their work. I want as many indie writers to be able to share as many copies of their book or comic book or game, wherever they're working on, with as many people as they can. And
Mm,
I think that a huge step in actually getting people to engage in their stuff is for them to understand that you made something worth engaging in. But you can't sell people on the idea that your stuff is actually worth their time unless you show your love for your own work. And so that was a huge issue for me starting off, where it's like, my stuff's okay. You can take a look at it if you want. And if you take that attitude, no one's ever going to bother, because they're going to be like, if you don't love it, why would I love it?
mm,
So that's half of the equation. The other half is that it is something that's just natural for writers. Just for whatever reason, in this field, when you start off writing, you're just going to hate your own stuff. Now, sometimes that's justified. Sometimes your stuff is in a rough place that you need to work on it and make it better.
mm.
But you have to be able to learn to embrace and love what you make as a writer if you truly want to become a good writer one day.
Yeah, completely agree. I have definitely had that struggle, and I still do. There's people at my workplace who recently bought my book, which is really funny. It's like a meme. Even the other day, someone was like had a copy of it in a break room, and they was like they've already read it and they're writing annotations because they're rereading it and they're pointing out things like, oh, in chapter 4, the foreshadowing. I'm like, I forgot I put that there. Like, um, but it's like really interesting because you do get this sense of, especially when someone is praising you, and I definitely do have this. So the first thing I want to point out is that I definitely relate to the modesty thing, like you're saying, like it is something natural that a lot of us have, where especially if you are being praised for something, where it's almost like you retreat in a sense of like you feel good about it, and you do want to think, oh, like yes, it's nice for someone to say that I'm good at something, but there is like a sort of almost natural reflex of, oh, did they really mean it, or was it really that good? Or, how intelligent is this person? Would they be able to really accurately quantify? Like you could think all kinds of stuff. But I find it just very interesting because whilst that may well be the case, I think there's a sort of paradoxical nature to it, because to even go through the process of sitting down and creating something, because especially if we're talking about books, this is not for most people. I mean, I know you, Anthony, you can write them like, a couple of weeks, but for the vast majority of people, they're taking like years of their life to craft these things and to put these stories out there. And let's just be honest, the vast majority of them are aiming for traditional publication. Then they're not trying to sell pub like what we did. A lot of them want to go for the publishers. And in order to even do that, you need to, sell them on the idea, and you need to be able to do it clearly and concisely, and you need to be able to communicate that. And if you do get with them and then they put you out there into the world and say, here, go on a book tour, you need to also somewhat be convincing about why. I mean, you're gonna have people who maybe already want your book or whatever, but you're gonna still have people who don't know whatever. And so there's always a certain degree of marketing involved, especially in this day and age. This is a big thing that a lot of authors, especially self-published authors, are struggling with, because they're finding they don't really want to do the marketing side of things. They don't really enjoy that, and I can understand that. A lot of writers, it's not a natural inclination for them to be like that. Part of the reason why they enjoy writing is because of the solitude they get from it, the kind of introverted nature, that it kind of usually links into. But yeah, I just think that I'm getting to the actual modesty thing, because what I'm talking about now is something where it is related to the modesty, but it's something that for me is I understand, but I think what's more so my issue with a lot of it is more to do with the fact of when you've written something and it's good, it's almost like a lot of writers feel like they're not allowed to say verbally out their own mouth that they made something that they actually like, or they made something that is good. Like when I'm at work, I'll just be completely honest. Now, right, I do a bit of both, because again, I still have that natural reflex of, is it really that good? Like, even though I have told myself for years, this book is great, it's better than a lot of other debuts out there. Like, I'm just going to be honest, I have said that, okay? And so have you. If you've written anything, so have you. In fact, there's some of you out there, and you are guilty of this, so I'm going to call you out for it. There's some of you who haven't even finished anything in your, like, any books, any stories, and you think your half-finished manuscript is better than half the stuff on the shelf. Be honest. Be honest. That is how a lot of writers think. And I know this because when you actually really get into it, especially if you talk to some writers, they'll be like, oh, this wasn't all that. I don't know why this is published. It just, and that's fine. That's normal. That's competition. I don't know why that's such a bad thing. And I'm not saying that we need to sit there in you got authors and they do, panels, whatever, cons and, conventions. I'm not saying they need to be sitting there having a diss match with each other, but it's one of these things where...
Yeah, to go off on a quick tangent, I watched a Christmas movie called A Christmas Story Christmas. It is a sequel to a very, very famous Christmas movie. It's the one where little Ralphie has a BB gun. He gets told, you're going to shoot your eye out, kid. So not to spoil too much about the sequel that came out like 20, 30 years after the original movie, but one of the side plots of the movie is that little Ralphie has grown up, and his big aspiration in his life is that he wants to become a sci-fi writer. And so he has this 1,500 page manuscript that he is trying to get published. And every time he thinks about it, he's already thinking about his acceptance speech. And one of the best scenes in the movie is that he's accepting a major award for it. And you have a bunch of different sci-fi writers that he snubbed out that year, like some of the all-time greats, including Frank Herbert for Dune, that his 1,500 page manuscript is going to outdo somehow. And of course, in the movie, he gets the reality wake-up dream of, no, you're a first-time author. No one's going to accept a 1,500 page manuscript from you. And so that's immediately what came to my head as you were talking about that.
Yeah. Because but it's true in so many instances. And I will say this, more experienced writers know this for a fact, because when you look at newer writers and when you think back to what a lot of us thought as newer writers, like, you did have these ridiculously ambitious, arrogant beliefs about what you could do and what the industry would accept. And, even if some people would see the rules and, oh, you can't go this way, well, my manuscript's different, like a lot of people think that. And the thing is that, look, no one wants to see people who just are like, just, completely always blowing smoke up their own ass. Like, sure, we don't want to see that. I get it. Right. That is annoying. We do want to see a degree of humility to people, because it makes them seem more grounded and more relatable. But I think that for me, I think my main thing is to do with not feeling like you cannot celebrate your own accomplishments. That's really what it is. It's not about hating on anyone else. It's not about tearing down the Frank Herberts. Okay. And look, if you do think that privately, cool, or amongst your friends, cool. That's fine. I think that's friendly competition. If that helps fuel you, Nothing wrong with that. I've said it multiple times, and a lot of people know this for a fact. You can go and look at some books. In fact, I used to do this. I mean, look, my book is YA. I will say flat out, and I will say this on record because I mean this. I do not like a lot of the YA books that are out there. I don't. And I don't think that's really that crazy of an opinion, because a lot of people feel a certain type of way about YA. And I think there's some very good YA. I think that there's certain authors who have improved as time's gone on with their series, and their debuts were maybe weak and then the sequels were a lot better. Like all of that stuff, right? So it's not just the whole genre is trash like some people would claim, which is part of the reason why I wanted to add to it, because I don't think that that's a fair assessment. But I would be lying if I said that looking at bad books did not in some way inspire me to like to think like, oh, you know, I need to do better in some ways for myself, or I need to make sure I avoid this. It can act as inspiration to see failure, or to see what you think of as failure or what's not very good. You see a book come out and people just slamming it. It's good for you to pay attention to that, to learn not what to do, you know, and that can help. And you might not like it either, but that can actually help you feel. And you'll be like, oh, I'm definitely not going to do that, right? So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You don't necessarily have to run around on the internet and tell everybody about it, but it's just one of those things where I don't think that, even if you did have that opinion, I think it's fair enough. Something I wanted to show, as I wanted to share, basically something I saw on Goodreads, right? Now, I do not use Goodreads very often. Okay, I don't use it as the social media platform that it's supposed to be for books and whatever. I just have it so my books are put somewhere, and so that when I read something, I update it. I just like having it, you know, for that. But I follow maybe like 3 authors, right? And one of them is an author called Mary Robinette Cole. Now, I don't usually like read her reviews that she puts on there. I don't usually read her posts on there. And I haven't really read most of her work. The only reason I'm following her on there for the most part is because she was on Writing Excuses with Brandon Sanderson, and I liked her input. Okay, so for that reason, I was following her. But here's the thing: sometime last year in December, she posted something that I thought was very interesting, especially given this topic, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to read through it. So it's reading time. Okay, it's reading time, guys. So, you know, if you don't like reading, I'm so sorry, but it's okay.
If you don't like reading, what are you doing here?
Hey, look, this is a storytelling podcast. You might not like reading, but you might like audiobooks, and that's great, because you know what? This is going to be an audiobook for you. So basically, so this is a review that Mary did. You can see she did it on her review of her own book that's called The Calculating Stars, part of the Lady Astronaut universe. Not read it, maybe I should, but I found this very interesting, and I left a like on it, and I never leave a like on anything on Goodreads. So she says, so I realized that reviewing my own work is weird, and also I just read this for the first time since I narrated the audiobook in 2018. Right now, I'm working on the 4th book in the series, The Martian Contingency, and rereading seemed like a good idea to get back into Elmer's voice. But I realized that this is actually the first time I've read it. Like the way I would read a normal book. The other times I read it were when I was proofing it, but you know, same thing. Proofing it or editing it. The fashionable thing would be for me to poo-poo my own work and list all the flaws in it. They're there, sure, but I was kind of shocked to discover that I really like this book. It made me cry. I remember these scenes, but I'd forgotten the words that I used to create them. The reason that I decided to go ahead and do a review is that we model, oh, I hate my writing all the time. And I think that's damaging. It makes you doubt your own taste when you're writing. In hindsight, it's obvious that this book would appeal to me since I wrote it for me. I was just surprised, and I think it's because I rarely see people who feel comfortable admitting that they like their own work. Anyway, I'm very glad I took the time to do the reread, and I'm finding myself looking forward to reading The Fated Sky, which I'm assuming is the sequel to this book that she wrote. And I have to say, right, I relate to this immensely, okay? Immensely, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic, because this is what I was talking about. Now, Mary wrote this post, again, like December 17th last year. But this is something I have been saying for years, and it's something I've always felt. And the reason why this post, I'm so glad I saw it, I'm so glad I was following her, just to happen to come across it, is because for the longest time, I didn't know if that was just in like something I was just thinking it was in my head, because I never really saw people bring this up. I never really saw people discuss the whole idea of writers being modest and somewhat kind of, disparaging their own work and acting like it isn't that good. And, people be like, oh, I loved your story. And they'll be like, yeah, it's all right. And I remember I would watch, and the reason why I saw this, because I would watch so many panels. I swear, like I used to, when I was like 17, 18, 19, learning the craft, I would spend days just watching panels of authors and agents and all day. Like I would just watch that stuff like it was television. It was crazy. But I'm yeah, and I would read reviews as well a lot. That was the two things I loved doing. I loved it. And I still do from time to time. But the thing that I found really interesting is, like I said, that's why I spotted this pattern. And I just found it very bizarre because, like I said earlier, from what I know, a lot of writers feel like deep down they do think they're quite good at least to some extent, or at the very least they gauge their skill level compared to others. And let's just be honest, if you really didn't think you had anything to offer the world, if you didn't think it was that good, why would you bother? So in order for you to go through this entire process, take all this time, submit it to publishers, do all of that, on some level, you must think this is good. Otherwise, you're not only wasting your time, but the publisher's time and your potential reader's time because you don't think it's good. So you're basically just telling everyone, yeah, it's not good, but thanks anyway. Like, what? I mean, come on now, on some level, you must believe that. And that's why I don't like it, because it's not just modesty. It's what I specifically think of as feigned modesty, as faux modesty, as pseudo modesty. Like, it's not real. It's not even genuine. And that's the real reason I don't like it. See, if you genuinely feel modest about something, that's one thing. But you can tell in a lot of these instances, you must on some level feel proud of what you've created to be sitting there, showcasing it, right? And to have gone through all the effort of doing this. Why did you submit it if you don't think it's good? Lots of writers have legitimately sat down and said that was garbage. And guess what? You never saw that story. You don't even know it exists. That if a writer told me that, like, you've got authors out here who say, oh, I've got all these stories and they'll never see the light of day. I believe them because I haven't seen it. I believe them. So I don't think they're being pseudo modest in those situations. I don't think they're downplaying anything, because if they were, well, then it'd be out there, right? So yeah, I wanted to bring that up because, as she says here, right, she said the reason I decided to go ahead and do a review is that we model, oh, I hate my writing all the time, and I think that's damaging. And this is so true. Like, this is something that so much writers do. Like, oh, I hate my writing. Even your characters, like, people, you'll have people have audiences that adore their characters, and they'll be like, this character, they're all right. And I'm just like, what? Like, you wrote about this character for like 8 books and they're all right? You sat down and made them. Why did you make them all right? Why didn't you make them great? And again, it's just I don't really even understand what the purpose is of it, other than to make the author just feel like they're not an asshole, really. I mean, that's basically what it seems like to me is the sole purpose of it. Anthony, I'm going on. I'm sorry. Is there anything, like, what do you think about that? And what do you think about what Mary had to say? Like, do you agree with her?
What I was thinking about here is kind of some of the reasons why people do it. I think it's partially what you said. It's this kind of false humility where they're afraid if they talk too much about their stuff, if they gas it up too much, it's going to make them look like a narcissist. And there is a danger of that. But a couple things came to mind. The first is that authors in general are just terrible judges of their own work. Oftentimes, they make the mistake of thinking it's better than it actually is. But just as often, they make the mistake of thinking it's a lot worse than it actually is. While we were talking, I looked up famous books that were saved from the dumpster, which are basically, these are manuscripts that authors wrote, thought were terrible, threw away, but someone convinced them to take it back, work on it a little bit more, and get it turned into a book. And one of the books I was surprised to see on that list is To Kill a Mockingbird. I think To Kill a Mockingbird is one of the great American novels, especially in discussing kind of the Southern racial climate during a certain period in U.S. history. And it is one of the best books ever written. Atticus Finch was rated by the American Film Institute as the greatest movie hero ever in American history. And the author threw her manuscript away at one point. She said, I'm never going to finish this book. This is trash. The other thing that came to mind while we were having our discussion, and this goes back to why authors don't hype up their work more, why we're so modest about the stuff we write is that a lot of people have this mistaken belief that how we view art is somehow a judgment of who we are and our character. And what I mean by this is, for example, I saw Ant-Man 3 Quantumania last week, and I absolutely hated it. I love the Ant-Man films, and I would give that third one a 3 out of 10. I thought it was that bad.
Wow.
And so,
I saw that just after the Eternals, it had a really low rating, but I didn't want to believe. I still
yeah,
haven't
it
seen the
is
episodes of that.
1% higher than the Eternals, and I would prefer to see this over the Eternals, but in terms of a product, I think it is worse made. But I bring it up because
Damn.
I have a friend who is basically my Marvel buddy. He's the one I always go to talk about the Marvel movies. He's probably listening to this podcast right now. If so, hi, Kyle. But me and him agree 9 times out of 10 on our opinions on the Marvel movies in terms of what we think of them. And he absolutely loved this movie. Do I think worse of him because he liked the movie and I didn't? Of course not. But I have met people who do think less of others if their opinions don't match in terms of art. And so, number one, that is ridiculous behavior to have. You should never judge someone just because of what they think of a particular art product. But number two, you have to get over that yourself. You should not have that behavior, and you shouldn't think that the average person will have that behavior towards you just because you have a disagreement of how good or bad a certain story is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a very funny thing because I think that yeah, it is coming from a lot of worrying about what other people are going to think about you and not wanting to seem a certain way, like we've already said. But again, like Mary said in her review of her own book, and even that, right? Like that's a common trend on Goodreads is for authors to put a review of their own book, and usually it's like this tongue-in-cheek thing, like, oh, I'm reviewing my book, and it's it's okay, and and sometimes people actually will kind of will say stuff a bit prideful, but it's always said in a jokey manner to somewhat kind of diffuse it so it doesn't seem like they're actually being like too arrogant. And this is something that I feel like I relate to, especially growing up in the UK, which may seem like an odd thing to bring up, but because compared to American culture, I would say over here we are way more generally socialized to not really be too arrogant or to think too much like to stand out in any particular way. And I think that actually affects us on so many levels that I could get into, like to do with even our media and how it's made and the ambition levels of people here and what we're willing to create. Like even things like fantasy books and stuff, there's people who read them here, but I think like in America, like you're gonna have like this way higher readership, and I know there's more people, but I just mean in a sense of like, for example, crime novels are very popular here and stuff like that. But some genres that just take a lot of ambition, a lot of time, it's like as if in general there's not always as much appreciation for it. It's very interesting anyway. It's a whole other thing to discuss, but I just wanted to bring it up because it relates to, in part, I think, to this idea of modesty and how that can even affect the way people produce things in a more modest fashion, not wanting to seem over the top. And and I just find that very interesting. Then you've got actually cultures like Japan where it's very, very much like that about saving face and modesty and having humility. But then actually they're like the opposite of the UK because their media is insane and crazy anyway. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, I just think that go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna. I won't go off on too much of a tangent, but it is fascinating where Japan is basically home to some of the most like bizarre stories in the world, and I absolutely love it. In many cases, I prefer their stuff to what we're making here, but it is very fascinating to see kind of the attitude and lifestyle that people are expected to have over there if you make that kind of stuff. And this is something that, again, we're both Metal Gear fans. We love Hideo Kojima. Hideo Kojima regularly makes fun of Americans for how obsessive they become over his work.
Yeah.
And he doesn't understand this. He doesn't understand the nerd geek mentality that we have over here. That's just
Mhm.
not a thing over there, despite the fact that they make some of what I would consider the nerdiest and geekiest stuff in the world.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's so odd, and yeah, it's very interesting. I would say a lot of it is because I would say a lot of it is a certain degree of repression and them not really. It's not really as culturally acceptable to express themselves in a certain type of way, even like when it comes to fashion and color and things of that nature. And that's why, like, even in anime, you'll see like, oh, the character, the delinquent character, he's got blonde hair in school. Oh, he dyed his hair, like, Whereas here, there's just like, it's a, someone of the hair color is just whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Just for the simple fact of, like I say, I think that it leads into why we're seeing, like, to an extent that here. I think it's just on a smaller scale, but it's a similar idea of, because another thing as well is the entire, I would say, the kind of literature community. I think there's a sense of class or a certain sense of behavior. And I'm not gonna, like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I want to compare it to something else that's very, very popular, right? Which is the opposite of this. That is something that, like, I have some level of interest in, not as much interest in, but still some level of interest in. And that's like hip hop and the whole rap community. So you've got it where, like, with the hip hop industry and the rap industry, it's pretty much part of the DNA of that stuff for it to be aggressive, loud, obnoxious, boisterous, right? People insulting each other's moms and whatever, your mama this and that, someone dissing them. Some people are really raw of it, like they'll go into people's dead relatives, like their kids, like whatever. Some people just don't get it. And it's very interesting that you've got that type of energy in something that's super popular, by the way. Like, this isn't like something where, like, how back in the day when it was underground. Like, this is something that is a worldwide phenomenon, to the point where people who live in other continents and countries, where are like, literally, there's like subcultures and groups there that just revolve around this. So it's very interesting how that kind of energy is in certain communities and exists there. But then, it's popular in that industry to be extremely arrogant, to be extremely obnoxious. Every guy, and I guess girl as well, like, everyone's coming out saying in their, latest rap song, I'm the greatest who ever did it. I'm the GOAT. I'm the best alive. It's like, you just started, bro. How are you the greatest? And you just was born yesterday. Like, it don't make any sense. But, and I'm gonna sit and I'm just gonna be honest. There's a lot of stuff about that industry I do not like, and I think it's just dysfunctional and just complete and utter trash. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. But at the same time, though, one thing that, and I think it's because naturally I have a certain type of personality where I can be quite obnoxious and somewhat boisterous and quite prideful. There's a part of that appeals to me, and clearly it appeals to a lot of people. And there are a lot of authors, even a lot of writers, who it also appeals to. So what I find very interesting, and I'm not saying if you like hip hop, that means, whatever, you can't be a modest person. No, of course you can. But what I'm saying is that I just find it interesting that there's an entire artistic medium of music, and you might have some people who debate if it's art, but whatever. It's an artistic medium, and the people are literally called artists or whatever, right? And they are expected. It's normal. It's commonplace for them to just out the gate just be like, I'm the greatest. Imagine in the writing world, like, you just dropped your debut novel, and it's not even it's not like you just about scraped getting onto the New York, bestseller, and you're just like, I'm the greatest who ever did it. Like, imagine, like, and you're just slating all the people who came before you, and it's like, they were garbage, they were trash. Like, someone's doing an interview with you, and they're just like, so what do you think about Stephen King? He's garbage. I'm the greatest who ever did it. Stephen King wishes he was me. Truth be told, he was ripping off someone like that. And then you make, like, I remember I used to make jokes about this with my friends, right? Like, what would it be like if you had, like, people always say this to me, because a lot of my friends, they don't write or anything, right? But I do. And they'll be a lot more heavily into, like, hip hop and rap. And they would say things like, man, wouldn't it be like, they'll be like, wouldn't it be interesting? Like, let's say I didn't like a book. And they'll be like, man, you should do like a diss story or this, like, it would be funny. Now, just because I'm the type of person who likes weird conceptual things, sometimes I think that would be interesting. What would that look like? Why has no one done this? You've got things where kind of people have dissed other people's work in, like, certain ways. Like, even when we're, like, kind of making fun of certain genres and being genre savvy and kind of poking fun at something, yeah, sure. But I mean like an outright like this, you know. But I've thought about this many times over the years. One thing I've come to the realization of is that, to be truthfully honest, I don't really want that type of. I wouldn't want the hip hop energy in the writing world. I don't really want that because, like I just said, there's a lot of things about it that to me is just dysfunctional and it's garbage. But the pride that exists, the idea of making something and feeling like, yeah, I made that and that was good, and I'm not ashamed to say that was good. And you know what? I will stand up for myself and defend my right to champion my own work. I just wish I saw more of that rather than every time when someone brings up, someone's story or they're talking about it, it's like they're downplaying the fact that it's they think it's good. I just think it's unnecessary. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say just on that whole comparison there. I'm not sure if that gave you any particular thoughts or anything, Anthony.
Yeah, no, this is a discussion I would love to have in another episode, but it's kind of funny how authors as people are treated. Where
Mm-hmm.
if you think about movies, actors and directors and producers, all of them play a part in the greater whole, but they get worshipped as celebrities. If you think
Mm,
about musical artists, they do a lot of the work, but they also usually have a lot of people helping out with instrumentation and production and all that, but they're treated as celebrities. And so it's
yeah.
funny that authors who they do about 95% of the work in terms of the finished product, you usually have an editor somewhere that's helping with grammar stuff,
Oh,
and you have the publishing house, but the rest of it is from the author. But authors very, very rarely get treated as celebrities. Like outside of maybe like Rowling, Neil Gaiman, George R. R. Martin, Sanderson, those are kind of the big four that are like, these are legitimate celebrities that people care about on a personal level. Pretty much all other authors alive right now, though, cult followings, and that's it. That's what they can look forward to. So it's kind of funny to think about that. The art that involves the most amount of personal involvement is also the art form that gets the least amount of celebrity status for the art maker.
but why do you think that is? Do you think that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, though, on behalf of the authors, where it's like because you don't present yourself in that sort of way, do you think that's what it is? Also, it's not a flashy medium, so I think it doesn't attract. Like, I remember even like years ago listening to writing excuses where they were talking about like why you don't see things like a writing X Factor or whatever. It's because what kind of talent show are you gonna have based around? Like, I would love to see it be done somehow, but it's just how do you make that engaging? Especially with how
Yeah,
things are shot. Like, how do you do it?
I have never understood authors who are able to live stream their writing process. I would be way too distracted by the audience watching me to be able to write anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I've thought about it a few times, but I've not. I don't really know. To be honest, I think it would be cool to do. It'd be interesting to do. I think I might be able to do it personally, but I don't know. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like, because especially as technology evolves and as we're becoming more interconnected, and as social media and the tech we're using becomes a more essential part of how we communicate and market ourselves and yada yada yada. Like, these are the types of things I start thinking about because if all this noise, if you're the quiet, timid, and this is the thing that we have to just be completely honest and real about. A big part of the reason why some of maybe your favorite authors could get away with that is because if they do get a publishing house backing them, the publishing house is what blasts through the noise for them, right? That's what does it. But I'm just going to say right now, if you're considering getting self-published, you're going to have a certain temperament where if you naturally are just because look, there's a lot of people who are going to be more quiet and they might look at us doing podcasts, but oh, I could never be on YouTube. I could never, and that's fine. That's fine. Not everyone's the same. There's nothing wrong with you, but you just have to recognize that in this world today, that's going to be something that's going to work against you if you don't learn how to, still effectively get yourself out there in a certain type of way, right? So not everything's suited to everyone, but one thing you can definitely do is you can communicate like that. So I don't want to go off into a whole tangent about people being confident and stuff like that, but I do want. I don't know. It's funny thing because in some ways it's kind of like who is this, like what's the message, like who's it for? And honestly, just for right, I just want people to just feel like they can be happy and confident in what they do. And I really don't want, if someone is like that already, I don't want them to think that they have to not be like that and suppress themselves because they think, well, that's not the thing to do.
Mhm.
Like I just don't think It's necessary, and it's something that I personally used to struggle with a lot. Like whenever I would think about making a writing video or whatever, I'd be like, "Oh, am I going to sound a bit too harsh with this, or am I going to sound blah blah?" But the reality is, a lot of times that is going to maintain people's attention regardless, because at the end of the day, people want to see those types of personalities, and also for a lot of people, there's a part of them that yearns to be like that in some ways. There's a lot of people who don't feel confident enough to do those things, and they kind of think, man, it would be cool if I could do that. I wish I could talk about my writing in that type of way. And so I think if you do kind of find that you have that disposition where you are a bit, you are quite proud, express it. Because I think, like Mary said, there needs to be a bit more of this energy behind being proud of your stuff. It doesn't mean you need to, again, it does not mean destroying other people and saying you're garbage, you're trash, right? It's just, like I said, it doesn't have to be literally hip hop where we're dissing each other. I think part of what is nice is that it's not really like that. But I just think that you should be comfortable expressing pride in what you've created. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what my thoughts are on it. Do you have anything else you want to say, Anthony, regarding this topic?
Yep, just a real couple quick things. First off, again, a lot of us love to compare ourselves. We love to compare our work to some of the greatest works that are made out there. Something to remember is that, especially for works that are made and published nowadays, there is a whole team of people that are helping these authors. These are editors who have years of experience, who know what's popular in the industry, who know what the readership likes. I know there are some big popular books out there that if you were to compare the original manuscript to the final manuscript, 50 to 75% of it was rewritten with the help of the publishing house. So just keep that in mind, that you are usually, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably just a solo storyteller trying to make it work on your own. So don't beat yourself too much if you feel your work isn't comparing to the all-time greats. It's because you don't have the same support team they do. And then the only other thing I would say is just kind of echoing your message. Self-confidence is good. Believe in yourself. Love yourself. Remember that your work has value. You have value. And whether everyone loves it or just a couple people love it, the fact that you are making something that you at least partially enjoy means that you've done something that's worth doing.
Yeah. And also, I've just got to throw this one in there. Just remember as well, because yes, whilst there are a team behind all those people, sometimes it still turns out to be trash. Okay, yep. So that's what definitely give you some confidence. I'm sorry, I had to do it. I know.
Ant-Man 3 was a $200 million failure.
Oh man, like it's the truth, guys. It's the truth, and you all know it. You all know it's the truth, and that's why you should like this video. You should subscribe, okay? Because this is probably one of the, as a lot of us would say, keeping it real. This is probably one of the realest writing podcast episodes you're ever going to hear in your life, because we're the greatest to ever do it. We're the greatest. I'm joking. But
also because we're going to get blacklisted by Disney for this.
Who cares? Who wants Disney anyway? No, Disney. I'm joking. Like, I need an adaptation. Like, But yeah, any final thoughts? Anything you want to say on the topic? Just anything else, or?
Nope. Someone is at my doorbell, so this is actually the perfect moment to kind of close things off of.
Well, that was perfect then. That's all I've got to say as well. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. We probably are not going to record another episode after this, so we will be in different clothes. And that's it. Thanks. Peace.